The conference hall buzzed with anticipation. Cameras clicking in rapid bursts as reporters jostled for position. Donald Trump adjusted his red tie, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Among the familiar faces, one stood out. Jonathan Blake, a veteran journalist known for his sharp tongue and relentless confrontations. Jonathan had been waiting for this moment. He wanted to corner Trump, to force him into a reaction that would make headlines. His questions were calculated, sharp, cutting, designed to provoke. Security exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Jonathan's reputation. He had rattled senators, CEOs, even generals. Trump began with a steady, composed introduction, outlining his vision for the country, pen scratched against notepads. Then Jonathan rose, voice booming across the room. "Mr. Trump," he demanded, "don't you think your policies are hurting everyday Americans while protecting the elite?" The hall fell silent. Trump's gaze locked on Jonathan, calm, unflinching. Jonathan braced for an outburst. Instead, Trump smiled faintly. "I hear your concern, Jonathan," he said evenly. "But sometimes what looks obvious isn't the full story. Sometimes what matters most is what we overlook." The words unsettled Jonathan. He had expected deflection, maybe even ridicule, but not composure. He pressed harder. "You've ignored the struggles of working-class families. Your policies favor corporations. Don't you feel responsible for their pain?" Trump's tone remained steady. "Responsibility is a heavy word," he said. "Leadership isn't about assigning blame. It's about finding solutions. And sometimes the first solution is listening." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Trump had sidestepped the aggression without anger, without mockery. Jonathan clenched his jaw, refusing to back down. "Solutions?" he shot back. "Millions are suffering while you make decisions behind closed doors." The room braced for impact. Trump leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the podium. His voice carried calm authority. "Jonathan," he said, "do you think shouting always reveals truth? Or does it sometimes bury it? You see the problem. But do you see the people living with it?" The question hung in the air. For the first time, Jonathan faltered. He had prepared statistics and accusations, but not an answer to that. The silence in the room shifted, less hostile, more curious. Trump softened his tone. "Let me tell you a story," he began. "There's a steel town in Pennsylvania. When the factories closed, families lost everything. But they didn't just wait for help. They stood together. They rebuilt piece by piece. That's leadership. Not solving every problem overnight, but giving people the power to fight for their own future." Jonathan's skepticism flickered. "So that justifies ignoring bigger issues?" he challenged, though his voice had lost its edge. "No," Trump replied gently. "It proves why leadership matters. You can't fix everything at once. But if you give people hope, they'll start to fix what's broken. That's real change." Jonathan swallowed hard. He had expected a clash. Instead, he found himself confronted not with statistics, but with perspective. Trump's final words lingered in the air. "Anger has its place, Jonathan. But if you let it lead you, you'll miss the answers right in front of you. Look deeper. Listen harder." The tension dissolved into a thoughtful hush. Reporters leaned forward, not just to record, but to understand. The room was no longer waiting for a fight. It was waiting for meaning. For a man so accustomed to confrontation, even the smallest hint of humility was disarming. Jonathan Blake stepped back, struggling to steady himself under the weight of 100 watchful eyes. His carefully rehearsed questions, crafted a sting, suddenly fell hollow against Trump's calm storytelling. "Are you saying we shouldn't question leaders?" Jonathan asked, his voice quieter now. Trump shook his head. "No, question everything. But ask with purpose, not just to provoke. Real inquiry seeks understanding, not headlines." Jonathan froze. The sharp retorts he had prepared vanished like smoke. He thought of his father's words. Asterisk, "Anger blinds us. Understanding reveals solutions." Asterisk, was that why Trump remained so unshaken? Not defensive, simply rooted in his own narrative, his purpose. Jonathan's fingers trembled as he adjusted his notes. He wanted confrontation. Yet an unexpected part of him wanted something different. He wanted to understand. The audience noticed a shift. Reporters whispered, some nodding, others scribbling notes with a new kind of urgency. Trump caught Jonathan's hesitation. His tone softened. You're not here to stir anger. You're here to shine light. Don't let frustration shadow the truth you're chasing. A lump formed in Jonathan's throat. For the first time in his career, he wondered if conversation might matter more than confrontation. He cleared his throat. Mr. Trump, what drives you to stay composed under fire? How do you take criticism without letting it break you? Trump's expression softened. I've learned something important, he said. Anger can be powerful, but it clouds judgment. When people attack, they forget their words echo far beyond the moment. I try to focus on solutions, not retaliation. Jonathan listened, skeptical but intrigued. The sincerity in Trump's voice was startling. His well-rehearsed lines meant to expose hypocrisy suddenly felt empty. Every decision, Trump continued, affects someone. Some will thank you. Others will curse you. The key is acting with purpose, not ego. If you lead with anger, you blind yourself to the chances you have to help. The words cut deeper than Jonathan expected. He had built his career sharpening arguments into weapons. But now, for the first time, he questioned whether confrontation alone ever healed anything. The hall had grown quiet, charged not with hostility, but possibility. Jonathan adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling. This was no longer just a press conference. It felt like a lesson, one about patience, humility, and perspective. When the conference ended, Jonathan lingered near the exit. Trump moved on, greeting supporters with a staff close behind. Instinct told Jonathan to leave, yet something rooted him in place. He had questions, real ones, not for headlines, but for clarity. Trump noticed him and offered a faint smile, extending his hand. Jonathan shook it firmly, respect and skepticism mingling in his grip. You're still here, Trump said. I want to understand, Jonathan admitted, not to attack, just to know why you respond the way you do. Trump nodded. Curiosity is good, better than anger. Ask to learn, not to judge. Jonathan's chest tightened. This wasn't a trap. It was guidance. Trump's composure was like a mirror, reflecting Jonathan's own impulsive instincts back at him. Walk with me, Trump said. Together, they stepped into a garden behind the conference hall, quiet and green. There, Trump spoke not of politics but of childhood, of failures and comebacks, of times when public opinion had been merciless, but lessons had been carved from the pain. Jonathan listened, notebook forgotten at his side. Slowly, the man he had come to expose revealed himself, not flawless, not untouchable, but undeniably human. The anger Jonathan had carried began to feel misplaced. Finally, he asked the question that weighed on him most. Have you ever doubted yourself? Trump's eyes flickered with something rare, a moment of unguarded vulnerability. Every day, Trump admitted, but doubt isn't weakness. It's the beginning of reflection. If you let it guide you, it can turn mistakes into opportunities. Jonathan's skepticism softened. Maybe leadership wasn't about domination, but about responsibility, about guiding. Trump paused by a fountain, watching the ripples spread. The world listens more than it talks, he said. But most people listen only to reply, not to understand. That's where change begins, with true listening. Jonathan froze. He had spent years speaking to be heard, not to understand. For the first time, he wanted to uncover the real stories behind the headlines. Trump shared one such story, a nurse who had written to him during the pandemic. Quietly, without fanfare, he had acted on her request. Leadership, he explained, is about noticing the unseen, helping when no one is watching. Jonathan felt a pang of shame. He had often dismissed personal stories as too small for the news cycle. Yet here was proof that those stories carried the most weight. As they walked back, Trump added, anger is loud, but it rarely teaches. Patience and understanding, those change people quietly, invisibly. Jonathan chuckled at the irony. He had come to expose corruption, only to discover a lesson in restraint. Hesitating, he shared a personal truth. His younger brother struggled with addiction. For years, Jonathan had chased outrage instead of solutions. Trump listened closely. Then you understand. Change starts with seeing the human side of problems. Facts matter, but hearts matter more. The words landed deep. Trump looked Jonathan in the eyes. Your words have power. You can build or destroy. Anger destroys. Empathy builds. Choose wisely. The crowd's noise faded into background. For the first time, Jonathan didn't see Trump as a politician to expose, but as a man offering perspective. Leadership wasn't about headlines. It was about service. Later, as Jonathan sat at his desk, his pen hovered. He could still write the fiery takedown he had planned, or he could write the truth he had witnessed. Resilience, empathy, leadership beyond anger. He chose the latter. When published, the article struck a chord. It spread quickly, not because it was confrontational, but because it was human. Readers were moved, reminded that leadership and journalism both carried the power to heal when grounded in empathy. Weeks later, other journalists called it a turning point. Not for the clash they expected, but for the calm that transformed it. In passing, Jonathan and Trump exchanged a small nod. No words, just acknowledgement. A journalist and a leader both changed. Jonathan smiled as he read the responses pouring in. The real story hadn't been about anger or confrontation at all. It had been about reflection, compassion, and the quiet strength of understanding. And in that moment he realized, the most powerful stories aren't the ones that tear people down, but the ones that remind us of the humanity we all share.